This lesson is an in-depth analysis of lipids or fats contained in our food. We do know that lipids are, compared to protein and carbohydrates, a great source of energy because they give 9 kilocalories per gram. That is a lot of calories, and they need to be taken in consideration, especially when you are dieting. Fats are very important. They are very important because they give taste, aroma, and flavor to food, and that is important in order to help your body better digest the food that you are eating. So a content of fats and lipids is not just a source of energy, and they should not be avoided because they have a lot of energy, but they help our body to better digest the food. At the same time, the presence of lipids or fat in our diet, it enables our body to better absorb vitamins. Obviously, if we eat too much fats, especially if combined with carbohydrates, inside our body they are stored, and they can either be stored under the skin or around and within organs. And this kind of storage that is around or within organs is the most dangerous, especially if it's close to the heart. But to the question of too much fat is wrong, how much is too much if we're talking and discussing about fat? In a healthy diet, if we take in consideration the recent research, has at least 20% of fat, but it can reach up to 30 or 35%. It depends the kind of fat you are eating. In general, from 20-25%, just 10% should come from saturated fat. You can reach 20%, but if you do a lot of activity. So lipids are good, too much are not good, but recently the diets and the scientists has concentration to a reduction of fats, and that is not correct. The equilibrium of a Mediterranean diet is the best on an healthy approach to diet. So 20-30% of fat is the right one, and by choosing the right quality of fat, you're doing the best to your body. When we are eating, where do they come from, these fats? We have here a chart for the classification of fats that help us to understand that the 95% of the fats that are in our diet are triglycerides, and they are the major components of our diets. But we do also eat phospholipids. They are a very important component of our cell membranes, so we have to eat this kind of fat. And they have an hydrophilic component, an hydrophobic component. What does it mean, hydrophilic and hydrophobic? Hydrophilic means that it is fine and likes water. Hydrophobic, it doesn't like water because that comes from the chemical structure of the phospholipids, because they contain a part, an organic compound that doesn't like water, and another one that likes water. So in fact, actually what they do, they help to mix fats and water on an emulsion, and that's why phospholipids are a component of our cell membranes. Another source of fat in our diet are the sterols, and we eat sterols, for example, when we eat cholesterol or hormones. So cholesterol is the base in our body, in our biochemical process, to be used in order to produce hormones, for example, the sexual hormones. If we want to discuss the triglyceride, here we see a molecule of triglyceride. Triglyceride is called triglyceride because it has 3 fatty acids connected to a molecule of glycerol. During the digestion, glycerol is separated from fatty acids. What the triglycerides, so we're not talking about cholesterol, sterols, phospholipids, but we're talking in concentrating our attention to triglycerides, because the 95% of fat are triglyceride. And the difference between one triglyceride and another is the kind of fatty acid that is connected and bound to the molecule of glycerol. So basically the difference is right here, as you can see. Because the fatty acids can be either saturated or unsaturated. Here we see the difference. A saturated fatty acids is the fatty acids that has all the hydrogen atoms connected and bound to the carbons. In an unsaturated fatty acids, like in this chart we can easily see, we see the double bond here, so we have one hydrogen base here and one hydrogen base here, and another double bond here. The saturated fatty acids are contained specifically in solid fats, for example, butter, margarine, and other kind of, like for example, the kind of storage that we have under the skin. And the unsaturated fat are more vegetable fats. And the unsaturated fat are the essential for our body, because our body generally is not capable of producing certain type of unsaturated fat, but is capable of producing saturated fat. Generally, the saturated fat are the ones that are more likely to deposit in our body. The unsaturated fat are more likely the one that clean our body from fats. So that's why our diet should contain 90% of fat coming from unsaturated source and 10% only coming from a saturated source of fat. These are the example of unsaturated and healthy fatty acids. They can be called oleic acid, and means omega-9, linoleic, omega-6, and linolenic acid, omega-3. The omega-3 and the omega-6 are unsaturated fatty acids that they have a double bond at the third carbon, the omega-3, in the opposite side of the COOH. The linoleic has the first double bond at the sixth carbon, the omega-9 at the ninth carbon. By the way, beside this, omega-3 and omega-6 are a source of energy important on our body, because our body cannot produce them, so we need to eat them. They are called the essential fatty acids. Oleic acid is also important because it is contained in olive oil, because it helps our body to reduce LDL level and increase the HDL level. The LDL is the low-density lipoprotein, is a bad kind of cholesterol, and the HDL is the high-density lipoprotein, is a good kind of cholesterol. If we increase the HDL and we reduce the LDL, we are just doing good to our blood and circulatory system. And that's why if you have client and customer that have higher level LDL, you should just eat more olive oil. And this chart, it helps us to understand in relation to the oil that we are consuming, what kind of a percentage of the fats we have, comparing saturated, polyunsaturated, and monounsaturated fat. So we said that monounsaturated fat are the best one for the LDL level of cholesterol. Polyunsaturated fat also, they increase the HDL. Saturated fat are the bad one, the one that more likely increase the LDL level, and they are stored in our body. So if we are looking to the kind of oil or the kind of a fatty food that provide us with more saturated fat, we see here on the red dot that we have coconut oil, that is the worst one, and we have butter, 2, and the canola oil has the least of saturated fat. If we're looking for a diet more rich on linoleic acids, or for example, alpha-linolenics, this is the omega-3, the one that we are looking for. So what kind of oil should I eat in order to have more omega-3 fatty acids? But here you can see very clear that the flaxseed oil is the best one, with 57% of omega-3. And in second place we have the canola oil, but the best one is the flaxseed. But if, for example, I have too much LDL and I wanna eat more oleic acid, what kind of oil should I eat? Well, you can see here that the olive oil has 75, 77 is safflower. So, for example, flaxseed oil and olive oil combined together is the best source of energy for our body. Pay attention to coconut oil, palm oil, butter, lard, and because they have the higher percentage of saturated fat. So be careful when you are choosing a kind of food that contain this kind of oil. These are examples of foods that contain saturated fats: cheese, meat, poultry. You can see margarine, butter. So these are saturated fats. And this food obviously provide you with more of this kind of fat. Monounsaturated, we already said olive oil. Also avocado, pecans, pistage. Polyunsaturated fat, we can see them on, as we said, in flaxseed oil, cottonseed oil, but also walnuts contain polyunsaturated fat. Pumpkin and sunflower, soy. This is a chart that explains to you the difference between a saturated acid. We said before it doesn't have a double bond. General, this is a unsaturated, in this case a monounsaturated fat. You can see it's bound. This conformation is called cheese. This is a form of unsaturated fat. It is called trans, and this happens especially when we do an hydrogenation of unsaturated fat that transform an unsaturated fat to a trans fatty acids. So the chemical and the processing of fats sometimes transform the unsaturated fat to trans fat that is very similar to saturated fat. And this is why the trans fat should not be consumed, and you should be careful of the presence of trans fat. And you can be warned that in a particular food, the trans fat is present if you look of a specific process of fat, for example, margarine, that is produced by the hydrogenization of unsaturated fat. So trans fat, as you said, they are not good. They are the major cause of the increase of the bad cholesterol in blood. As I said before, they are the result of the chemical reaction of saturation, because of bend of the bond between the carbons. They increase the LDL, and obviously if they increase the LDL, they increase the cardiovascular disease chance. Coming to the conclusion of this lesson, how much fat should be present in a healthy diet? We said 20 to 30%. Less than 10% should come from saturated fat. Possible no trans fat. And then important is to eat some cholesterol, vitamin D. And remember that fats is important in the diet because it helps to absorb this kind of vitamin. Now it's up to you, for example, to calculate how much fats in grams should be composed of a diet of 2,200 kilocalories and 22% of fats. Just a tip for the calculus, you have to multiply 200 kilocalories for 22%, then calculate the number of kilocalories that should come from fat, then divide that for 9, and you obtain the number of grams. And then one more thing, you might want to understand how many grams of that portion of fat should come from saturated fat. As I suggested before, just 10%.